Are the Ghanaian and Nigerian film industries growing backwards? And do actors actually need therapy after every role they play in a movie? And also, are audiences losing appetite for the theater communal experience? These are just but a few questions that we'll be answering on this episode of the Film Mandate from articles and videos from actors like Leonardo DiCaprio and Michael B. Jordan and Ghanaian Hollywood director Leila Djansi. So we'll be talking about all these stories right here on this first episode of the Film Mandate for 2026. And I'd like to take this opportunity to wish you all Happy New Year. Kindly stay tuned for this episode. My name is Papa Otu, and this is the Film Mandate. Hello and welcome back to the Film Mandate, where, as usual, I bring to you movie news, reviews, and reactions, both from the African front and the international scene. And thanks for joining me for this very first episode for the new year. So, just a little change I've made to this particular uh, videos that I've been doing. So, if you are subscribed to my personal channel, you realize that I've changed the name from the Film Monday to Papa O2. However, there is a dedicated channel for the Film Mandate content that I've been producing, and it's still the Film Mandate at the Film Mandate on YouTube. However, the videos will still be shared on my personal page, which is, or the personal account, which is Papa O2 at Papa O2. And the reason being that on the Papa O2 platform, it has a mixture of different videos, that is those dedicated to the film reviews and the film content, and others dedicated to motivational. So if you don't mind, excellent. But if you are more into film only content, then that can be found at the Film Mandate account. So thanks so much for this um, notice. So let's delve into the stories right away. And in the very first story, one of the debates that have been ongoing in Ghana for quite some time compared to perhaps other industries is whether our industries are dead or alive. Others are of the opinion that the industry is dead. Others are of the opinion that the industry is struggling, not dead entirely, but struggling. And there's these debates have been ongoing for so long a time. Well, it looks like the one of the most vocal and prominent filmmaker of Ghanaian origin, based in Hollywood, Leila Djansi, not has not just waded into the water, because she's been talking about these things for quite some time. And this actually isn't the first time that she's spoken about all these things with regards to how perhaps the Ghanaian industry is not as buoyant as it's supposed to be. And she brings out some interesting concerns with regards to how the industry is faring. And I can perfectly understand her because of the fact that she works in a film industry where the system, if not perfect, it's very credible in how it runs. It has, I'm sure, uncertain that it has its own shortfalls, but comparatively to our industry, perhaps we may even call our industry non-existent. And this is what she has said in an article published in News Ghana. And this is what the article says: that Jansi says Ghanaian and Nigerian film industries growing backward. And it's quite a lengthy article with a lot that she's highlighted on. So we'll do our best just to glean on the essentials. But just to read the very first couple of paragraphs, this is what she had to say. Award-winning filmmaker Leila Djansi has criticized the structural direction of Ghanaian and Nigerian film industries, describing them as self-serving systems that prioritize individual gain over long-term creative growth. The American Ghanaian director shared her observations in a Facebook reflection after working across multiple time zones. Jansi pointed to the dominance of individual YouTube platforms as evidence of the problem. She stated that every major player owning a plot of land on YouTube demonstrates a self serving, tribal serving, and wealth serving approach. According to the filmmaker, this structure has resulted in repetitive content driven by algorithms rather than artistic purpose. The director of films, including I Sing of a Whale and Sinking Sands, argued that the current system produces fast production cycles with quick turnover but no lasting memory or established canon. She warned that such an approach fails to build institutions or preserve creative heritage. Jansi stated that the structure doesn't build shared libraries or lasting studios, but instead creates silos that collapse inward. And honestly, I actually don't disagree at all as to her observations as to how our industry is faring at the moment. As to whether it's going backward, that I perhaps may differ a little bit about it because for I think for just last year alone, I think we had about 36 films released officially in the cinemas, which I must say may not necessarily be the clear, healthy indication as to how the industry is faring, but at least it points to how progressive the industry has been over the couple of years. And if perhaps if you want to know about this more, check the last video I did in the year 2025, and I did read an article from GH Movie Freak, which highlighted how we have been doing these movies. I mean, the movie releases in cinemas have moved up to 36, which is a vast improvement compared to other years. However, I when it comes to the systems which she is referring to, I do indeed understand the angle she's coming from, uh, especially owing to the fact that when it comes to what we have here as an industry, that is by here I mean Ghana, the challenge has always been the unavailability or the unavailability of widespread network of distribution channels for films to be able to even recoup their cost when they are released nationally or locally. And unfortunately, it looks like we do not have that wide network of distribution channels, whether be it a streaming service owned by or for Ghanaians or for Africans. We do not have that wider network. And even if we do, whether there is the clear delineated process as to how to take your film into onto this platform or to be acquired by these, I don't think it is not really there isn't really available information to help make it easy for filmmakers to have their movies on some of these platforms. That is not to say that others have not learned and helped in making that possible for themselves. And just as she's saying, it looks like the industry ends up being built around individuals rather than the it's a self-serving system for individuals rather than the industry as a whole. And I can understand from that perspective of filmmakers who are much more concerned about their productions rather than the cumulative whole, because at the end of the day, a filmmaker is looking at making enough proceeds in order to have his next film produced, whether his or her next film produced, whether by proceeds from the sales or ticket sales of the movies in the cinemas, or securing some territorial rights in order to be able to get some funding or revenue to offset their investment to help secure another, funds or revenue from or funds from investors. So when you live or when you are in an industry like ours, where structures are not working well, you tend to end up thinking about yourself rather than the big, industry as a whole, because you are bent in making sure that you secure enough funding to make your next movie. And indeed, I must say it is not an easy process. And I can understand her because, relatively to what she is used to in the US, the system really works. And that is not to say we are making any excuses for how our industry is faring. But I clearly understand that when you work in a system that is very efficient, and you end up in a system that is completely opposite, polar opposite to what you she is used to, you are likely to see all the clear portals. And the good thing is this: the reason why I do agree with her is the fact that it's not like she hasn't worked in our industry before. She has. And from time to time she comes back to do a shoot here, a production here, and there. And therefore she has garnered experiences in our industry as well, compared to what she is now, her home base of producing movies. So I can understand the things that the perspective she has on our industry that perhaps the ordinary filmmaker like myself may not have. And it's good to have people with such oversight to be able to see some of these things and open, engaging dialogue as to how we can resolve these issues. And one of the key issues she did mention was the fact that a lot of filmmakers have now resorted to putting their movies on the YouTube platform. That is not to say the YouTube platform isn't a good place to exhibit your works, but indeed it points to a bigger problem as to the fact that, because it's a platform that your revenue or proceeds may not be as huge as you having a box office success hit in the cinemas, or maybe your film being acquired for a major streaming service that deals with films, or a territorial securing territorial distribution somewhere around the world. You then tend to focus on beating down your budget to such a minuscule, manageable amount, just to churn out a good production and put it online. So as a result of that, it indeed has watered down the production quality, um, to make in making these movies. So at the end of the day, if you read the entire article, she did stress on the fact that there was a film that she was watching on YouTube, and she ended up not liking it, and talking about how someone has invested or spent time to make a 2.5 hour film, but doesn't have that potency of a story to, you know I mean, definitely they will have their audiences that they'll be serving, but the nutshell of it is the fact that she's stressing on the fact that the quality has been watered down, because the only, perhaps some of the options that are available to filmmakers is YouTube. And indeed, on another note, if I'm to really delve into or understand the problem she's addressing, there is the need for us to have a consensus or an agreement that all films, one way or the other, should pass through a system of network in screening in the cinemas, however small or big they may be, before ending up on a streaming service, so that every movie gets a fair share of an attempt to be able to recoup their revenue one way or the other. And that indeed would have been the ideal system back in the days before the advent of social media. I would even say the advent of internet. Films used to go through a number of dedicated spaces for movie screenings or cinemas. And there was that system in place. That was when Gamma Films existed, and they had an executive theater on the premises of Gamma Films, and a, a collective, a number of Nankani and Hagen limited chain of cinemas. Unfortunately, the chain of cinemas do not exist today for these practices to be ongoing. However, we still have some cinemas that are present at the moment, but unfortunately, I can also understand from the cinema's perspective as to how a number of them are not making, when the movies go to these cinemas, they are not really sustainable in the long term in the cinemas, and therefore that doesn't have enough long lifespan comparatively to what the foreign movies are able to do or perform in the cinema. So, indeed, I can understand her concern and why perhaps that indeed is the case that we are faced with. And bear in mind, she is indeed an award, multi-nominated, award-winning filmmaker who has made movies like, Sinking Suns and, I Sing of a World and Ties That Bind, that she brought together such powerful actresses from all across, the continent, even the globe, to star in these films. So obviously she knows what she's talking about, and she is indeed well on top of what she is indeed doing. So Ties That Bind is one of the films that she had directed, and indeed she has vast experience. She's been in the industry for decades now, so she knows what she's talking about. And I do understand the frustration sometimes when you come from an industry that is very functional, and then it looks like that is the reverse in another industry. But all in all, as to whether it is going backwards for me personally, that I might not be in her shoes. I may not see the very challenge that she's seeing, but I'm glad that at least one way or the other, she's not given up on the industry. To for someone who could have given up on the industry, that would have been that she would not talk about the challenges that the industry is facing. But for one way or the other, it looks like the industry is dear to her heart, and she is still saying what could be done to help build the industry. And I'm hoping that these conversations will not just be um, something just spoken on any platform without a proper consideration of her thoughts as well. And my hope is that she perhaps might have reached out to the National Film Authority to voice out her concern, because at the end of the day, she also has an experience that she can bring up aboard the film industry to help build it as we should. As to the Nigerian film industry, yes, with the YouTube thing, that has sort of become a main staple in terms of revenue for a lot of the Nollywood filmmakers, and that seems to be trickling into Ghana as well, where a lot of filmmakers now are also resorting to putting their productions on the YouTube platform. And the main bane or the main challenge of that is how that waters down the production value of the movies, because to increase the production value of any movie would mean that you have to invest enough, a reasonable amount of money to be able to upscale the production for the purposes of being uh, able to compete highly on international stage or in cinemas, or deserving to be shown in cinemas. And I like one thing that she said that I think for my African family of filmmakers, perhaps we need to really pay attention to that. The making of films, in as much as it is indeed it's something that can be enjoyed globally. I think we should really look inwardly and see to it that we build our industry properly with a network of cinemas, the distribution outlets, and see to it that it serves us first. And secondary is whether the world indeed approves of our film or not. That wouldn't matter, because if you're able to break even in our own country, on our own continent, and the surplus is just the revenue that come from other regions, that would really be of great help to our industry. So that is one thing that she said that I think it is indeed something that we all have to take a critical look at and have it resolved. But all in all, I don't know much about whether the industry is going backwards because there's been a little improvement. Yes, if you consider how far we have come, we've actually gone backwards compared to how the industry was back then. Even though the cinemas back then may not be maybe relatively the same or maybe less or more, they had a form of a system that was working. It may not have been the perfect system, but it was better, or in some sense, it was better. But in today's era, too, there's been a lot of improvements as well, where you have the National Film Authority enforcing classifications. The cinemas, one way or the other, are doing the best that they can to make sure films are in these places. But I think the systems of the past could have been working better had we kept on building upon it if there's not been any disruption in the governance of the country. So it has been a challenge, and I must say that yes, we should have been far ahead in terms of where the industry standard should have been. But unfortunately, that is not the case because if you take a critical look as to how far we have grown as a film industry, I think we should be close to 100 years old, maybe not 100 years, somewhere 100 years old if you are counting the colonial era when we began making movies to now. So that indeed is of a concern. And as much as we've had some micro improvements in certain places, at least it's better than none. But we could do far, far better than what we are doing now. And I think her concerns are indeed very is something that we need to take into consideration. And perhaps the right authorities and stakeholders should invite her aboard together with anybody who may have wisdom or knowledge as to how we can help improve the industry and see to where we do it together. So, yeah, let me know what you think about Leila Djansi's concern. Do you agree that prioritizing quantity and viral fame over training and quality holds an industry back? Personally, I think it does hold the industry back. So let me know what you think in the comment section below with all your thoughts. And that is it. So we're moving on from this story to another interesting story. And the question I will start with is the fact that do actors need therapy after every role they play? If not for every role, do they even need it for some of the roles that they immerse themselves so much that they get lost in that character? Well, this happens to be the a story that Michael B. Jordan, in an interview that she granted to Good Morning America, he brought up. It's something that I think he's brought up before when he after the movie that he starred in, and that is Black Panther. He starred in the movie as Killmonger, if I'm not mistaken. So Michael B. Jordan starred in that movie. What's it called? Black Panther as Killmonger, and everybody can attest to the fact that his, performance as Killmonger is one of the most riveting and very intimidating villain in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And one of the things that he realized after starring in the film was how after the movie, he realized that I mean, the persona, the psychological toll on him, was too much that he had to decompress. So he had to seek therapy and talk about it to be able to get it off him. And indeed, I can understand how powerful that would have felt. And I think even Idris Damson also, some time back, Idris Damson, the gentleman who starred in Snowfall, also spoke about how when he was playing the role of what's it called in Snowfall, the character he embodied, had, from a spiritual point of view, he sort of felt a presence, and that was too much for him, and he had to call on his mom, and and seek therapy one way or the other to have it resolved. So, in an article published in the Hollywood Reporter, Michael B. Jordan on why he needed therapy after playing Black Panther villain. So let me just take a quick read as to what the story is. So Michael B. Jordan is opening up about why he went to therapy after playing the villain in 2018's Black Panther. During a recent interview on CBS Sunday Morning, the Sinister spoke about the impact of fully immersing himself in his Eric Killmonger role for the Ryan Coogler directed Marvel film. After the movie, it's kind of stuck with me for a bit, he said. Went to therapy, talked about it, found a way to kind of just decompress. And I think at that point, I was still learning that I needed to decompress from a character, you know, there's no blueprint to this. So there you have it. That is Michael B. Jordan talking about his experience after starring in the role of Killmonger some time back. So let me so to really reflect on what he said, I a couple, I mean, years ago, saw, I mean, or I witnessed just a couple of years ago, I witnessed this very experience that he's talking about, and I was part of an audition where the a lady was supposed to play, you know, a role of. I mean, she's been abused, and therefore she had to sort of show forth her brokenness and how um, whatever challenge she went in has impacted her so much. And the director was not getting her to, she wasn't getting what she wanted from the actress. So she sort of asked her to tap deep within herself, for a pain or something that could, bring out that trauma. And when she asked her to go on and act that piece of, that part of a role all over again, listen, she was acting with two other ladies in sorry, at a venue where we are having this auditioning, or yeah, rehearsal auditioning. And then in order to tap into that, side of her, she, after saying a line or two, she screamed, and the scream was so chilling that all of us who were seated watching it were shook. I mean, were shook by that. And the lady she were acting with, it pierced them so much that they started crying. And the lady herself who was playing that role couldn't help herself. She was just, you know, shivering and broke, into tears. And it's not like she broke into tears acting that role. She was, it's like she was caught up in that moment that she tapped into, and she couldn't get out of it. So the rehearsals had to be stopped, and then the lady director and other people had to go to her aid and calmly and gently talk her out of that space, head space. I don't know what became of her, whether she went on to seek for therapy or not, but these things can really take a toll of on you when you delve so deep into the persona of the character that you are putting on. And I can understand why Michael B. Jordan would need the therapy for this. There's been countless actors who have um, told, have sort of made us know their experience after taking upon certain roles. And I remember watching an interview of Gary Oldman, who said that at a point in time, he lost his actual accent, or accent as a British man. He lost it. He couldn't even identify. So he had to find help to sort of help him come back to that point where he could, speak, I mean, his real accent, will be able to speak it or express in himself in that. So there's been several actors. It is said that Heath Ledger's Joker, Heath Ledger went so deep into that role that it became quite difficult for him to separate himself, and unfortunately, we lost him tragically as well. So it can take a toll. You know, for you to be an actor, you have to be a strong-willed, strong-minded person. But even with that, you still need some form of therapy, one way or the other, to get yourself out of that headspace when your character ends up stuck with you. And I think for Michael B. Jordan to have embarked on that journey, that is indeed great to bring him back to his own self so that he can embody other characters as well. So that is indeed, I personally think it is the right thing to do to decompress from those characters that you are playing so that you can avail yourself to be able to play other roles. But most importantly, to make sure that mentally you are sound. It is important that as an actor, whatever you do mentally, you find yourself in that clean and clear headspace to be able to continue doing your job and also to live as your fully able-bodied self. So I can understand the challenge that he had to, go through. So let me know what you think. Does an actor, as an actor, if you go through a role, do you need therapy? Obviously, from this article, it seems that that was necessary. And let me know what you think about Michael B. Jordan's performance as Killmonger. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. So we're now moving on to our last and final story for the day, and some of the debates that we've had over the years. As a matter of fact, not just debate, but the reality is the fact that over the couple of, as particularly after the pandemic, box office receipts have dipped. And perhaps one of the challenge of the box office receipt dipping is the fact that maybe quality movies were not, I mean, perhaps the ratio of quality movies to the ones that are not quality may be a reason. But I think everybody can attest to the fact that one of the main reasons is um, the introduction of streaming services, and not just that, but the fact that also price hikes of tickets may be the reason why some people may not want to go into the cinemas. Well, Leonardo DiCaprio has also waded into this conversation, and he has posed the question whether cinemas are needed even now, as in the current situation we find ourselves in. Are cinemas needed now? So that's a question that he has asked, and I felt it's very necessary we perhaps dive into it and see whether that indeed is the case. So let's take it. Yeah, so let's take a look quickly as to what his story is about. And this is captured in the Hollywood Reporter. Yeah, so and this is captured in the Hollywood Reporter, and this is what he had to say. Leonardo DiCaprio questions if people still have the appetite for movie theaters. Will cinemas become silos like jazz bars? The one battle after another actor said of the movie-going experience. So this is what he had to say. Do people still have an appetite to attend movie theaters? That's a question Leonardo DiCaprio is pondering. In a Saturday interview with The Times, the one battle after another star discussed the shifting film landscape, which he noted is changing at a lightning speed. He further pointed out the modern demand of streaming and how it has impacted the movie going experience. We are looking at a huge transition. First, documentaries disappeared from cinemas. Now dramas only get finite time, and people wait to see it on streamers. I don't know. DiCaprio said, do people still have the appetite, or will cinemas become silos like jazz bars? And indeed, it is a question that I believe that every filmmaker or stakeholder in the film industry should be asking themselves, because listen, whether we like to accept it or not, the landscape has changed so dramatically that cinemas are not making, or films are not making such huge profits comparatively to what happened in the pre-pandemic era. And yes, perhaps one of the main reasons attributed to this is the avalanche of streaming content. And not just that, I would even dare say the avalanche of social media content as well. But perhaps that also points to the fact that when most of the films that are made in the cinemas may not be, some, not all, but some may not be of top-notch quality to warrant perhaps cinema or film enthusiasts to go to the cinemas to pay top, money to watch those films. So it is indeed a challenge, and coupled with other things as well. I mean, I won't just attribute the declining attendance of cinemas to just economic reasons and what's it called, streaming services alone. I'm sure there are a myriad of reasons why that is the case, but whether we like it or not, that is indeed the situation. A report perhaps before the pandemic era captures that the last time we had the highest box office receipts ever in the world, the entirety of the world, was somewhere around 2019. That was a year before the pandemic. And afterwards, we've never had the cinema bouncing back to that state again. It is hoped that perhaps this year might see to it that the cinemas would indeed bounce back to the level where there are a lot of people going to the cinemas, and box of good films obviously will end up making good enough movies. So there are a number of factors indeed that points to that fact, and indeed these are questions that we need to pay attention to and ask ourselves as to how we can have this resolved. Because for filmmakers, cinemas is a communal experience that can be compared to similar like things like sports and all that, especially for those who are films. I know sports is of a different level altogether, but watching a film on a big screen, particularly when the films were made for such screens and retrofitted for the sound and everything, indeed, there's no better experience to watch those films than in the cinemas. And obviously, if the cinemas are not doing well, there's going to come a time that they may resort to closing them down. As we've already seen, a lot of cinemas have shut down. Some of them have gone bankrupt all across the world, and it's really disheartening when we are all hoping that the cinemas are going to hold the fort, but unfortunately, things are not going the way as planned. So, with Leonardo DiCaprio asking this question, I think it does make sense for us all to find a reasonable solution, or even whether there's going to be a reasonable solution, that we cannot tell. But how do we have a healthy theatrical market? That is the question that we need to find an answer to. And that has to be, we need to be very proactive in that. Otherwise, there's going to come a time we may come to a point that only blockbuster films like the superhero movies being churned out by Marvel and DC and other big blockbusters would only be the films in the cinemas. Just as he said, if you read the article, he pointed to a very clear, noticeable fact that a lot of films, be it dramas, comedies, have finite time in the cinemas. If you are using the North American box office or theatrical experience as an example, prior to the pandemic, it was 90-day theatrical window for movies. But even around that time, a lot of the films weren't having that full theatrical experience because perhaps people weren't watching it, and it kept dwindling down. And the major studios who have the 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 strength to push it to like cinemas worldwide resorted to only going for the bigger IPs, where they can make huge sums of money. So it did go a long way to affect films who stand the high chance of potentially, getting these opportunities. And unfortunately, with the advent of streaming services, it even worsened the case where a lot of films ended up on streaming services. If it's drama, if it's comedy, and doesn't have high stars in it and doesn't have the traction, it ends up on a streaming platform rather than being in the cinemas. And that indeed has gone a long way to affect the cinema adversely rather than positively. So these are questions that I think, as a man who has been in the industry for over 4 decades, if I'm not mistaken, indeed he has seen it decline. And even for those of us who are not in the industry and we are observing from afar, I mean, are not in the industry there, are observing from afar, we've noticed it dwindling. And indeed, it is sad that has come to that point. But regardless, this the one battle after another star indeed has raised an important question that I hope that not just the American filmmakers, but even filmmakers from the continent of Africa and other places would need to ask ourselves these questions. Is it that the audiences are losing appetite? And if they are losing appetite for the cinema going experience, what is contributing to that? Is it because of the avalanche of content being produced on social media or on in the cinemas? Does it mean that those content are far better than what we have in the cinemas? What could be the issue? Those are questions that we need to find solutions to it as soon as possible before we find ourselves at a place where the cinema going experience becomes a thing of the past. So let me know what you think with regards to his concern as to whether you know you know audiences are losing appetite for the cinema going experience, or are they losing appetite for the films being produced in the cinemas, are being shown in the cinemas because perhaps they are not the best? Whatever your thoughts may be, kindly leave it in the comment section below. And yeah, so wrapping up these three stories, as usual, you know that from after every weekend, I show you the performances of the box office, of films, from around the world. So let's quickly delve into that one before we wrap up today's episode of the Film Mandate. So we now go to the box office result. We'll take a look at the quickly at the box office results. First, starting with the North American box office, and yeah, so let's start with that one first. Starting with the American box office, that's the domestic box office for North America, be it that is Canada and sorry, that is Canada and US. The top 10 films for this year, this first weekend of the year, we have Avatar Fire and Ash still maintaining its position at one, and it has made a total of 306,024,602, and that is after a domestic gross over this weekend of $40,029,348. And number two, still maintaining the same position as Zootopia 2, which made $19,034,969, and the total for domestic is 363,647,129. And number four, and number three, going up from number four is the housemaid, making $14,865,000, and the total domestic of 75,724,000. And number four, dropping from number three, is Marty Supreme, which has made $12,554,127, and a total domestic of $56,736. And number five, and maintaining the same position, is Anaconda, making $10 million, and a total domestic of $45,860,645. And number six, upping itself from number seven, is the SpongeBob movie Search for SquarePants, which has made $8.2 million this weekend, and a total of $57,634,000. And number seven is David, which has made $8 million, $2,169 and a total domestic of 70,112,578. And number eight, still maintaining the same position, is Song Sang Blue, which has made $5,810,000 and a total domestic of $24,943,010. And number nine, we have Wicked for Gold, making still maintaining the same position, is $3,250,000 and a total domestic of $339,869,725. And last but not the least, just for the top 10, it has more than that, but just for the top 10, we have Five Nights at Freddy's 2, which made 2.7 million this weekend, and a total domestic of 125 million 220,660 dollars. So there is your top 10 domestic box office for the North American, yeah, North American industry. Now moving on to the worldwide box office, because it's a new weekend, I'm sure the numbers are still being tabulated. So there isn't much movies on the worldwide box office. I'm sure by next weekend we'll have it fully populated. But what we have so far is We Bury the Dead, which has made $2,530,463. We are yet to get the complete total, but as it stands now, the foreign numbers that has come for that movie alone is $73. That's quite strange. Anyway, and there is also the re-release of The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers 2026, and it has made $8,378. So there you have it. This makes up your total box office for for the worldwide box office. So all too soon, we have come to an end of this episode of the Film Mandate. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll come your way again tomorrow with another exciting episode of the Film Mandate. My name is Papa O2, and I'll come your way again with another exciting episode of the Film Mandate. I'll see you soon.